Do you have a shed, Quonset, or building on your yard that you want to turn into a shop, but you don't know whether or not you should do it without putting concrete in first? Here's a few things that I think you should know before you do that and take into consideration. The first thing, and really the main issue with a dirt floor shop, is going to be your humidity. The biggest problem that we have run across with this shop in 2 years is trying to deal with moisture. That's really the biggest problem you're going to face when it comes to a dirt floor shop. The ways that we have found to battle this is we have an electric furnace that we keep our temperature at 63 all the time so that we are able to run a dehumidifier. Actually, we're running 2 right now, but then that allows us to run a dehumidifier year-round and keep our moisture and humidity down. That being said, that's something that you have to stay on top of and monitor them, because if you start having issues with temperatures or too low of moistures and your dehumidifiers aren't cutting on and off, they can freeze up. Another thing I've noticed with moisture is that in the spring, sometimes during a fast melt, we will have water coming in through the floor in this shop, and then we have to run a little bilge pump or pump to get rid of that moisture. That's really the biggest issues you're going to find. Also, interestingly enough, we usually have more humidity issues and moisture problems in the summer due to fluctuating weather conditions like rain. Heavy rainfall often will also seep in through the floor. But that's going to be the number one thing that you want to take into consideration when you think about building a shop and still having a dirt floor. Other than that, the rest of the issues with a dirt floor shop are really secondary and quite easy to deal with. The second thing with a dirt floor shop is that when you're working on equipment, whether you're climbing underneath or doing an oil change, it really is hard to stay clean. And so that's where cardboard comes into play. You cannot keep enough nice pieces of cardboard on hand, whether you're doing oil changes so that you could put your pails on top of it, and then anything that drips isn't going into the floor because you're not using sawdust or Absorball to clean up the floor. Anything that falls on it is getting absorbed. The cardboard is nice too. You can put it underneath your equipment and you can work on it without getting absolutely covered in dust. Another thing you could do is build, some 4x8 sheet plywood platforms and drive your equipment on it. But when you've got massive tractors, combines, or other stuff, it doesn't really seem like a good long-term solution for me. So that's why I just keep my cardboard on hand. The other thing that really does suck is that when you're working on a piece of equipment, and let's say you're just working on it up here, whatever, you don't think, I don't need to put down a piece of cardboard, which makes sense to me. But then you're working on it, and say you're changing a chain on a planter or whatever. You drop the half link, the dirt floor sucks. When you drop stuff on it, it is hard to find, especially if you don't keep it clean. And really, there's not a great way to keep it clean. Sure, if I bring a combine in and I clean out the feeder house or whatever, I can scoop up most of it, but you've always got a layer of dust and dirt on top of the floor that you have to deal with. And when you're working on stuff, the best thing to do then, if you drop something, is probably have a magnet or just get something else, because you may not end up finding it. It really isn't all doom and gloom though, and I am so happy to have this shop at my place to work out of. And if we had to put concrete in first, we may not have ever even done it because the concrete is such a huge cost. And all these things that I brought up, they are easy to deal with. You can stay on top of them, and it makes working in a dirt floor shop really not that bad. If it wasn't for the constant battle with moisture, I would say we could go another 10 years without putting concrete in, but the moisture battle, it will slowly over time still take a toll on the inside of your shop. So I think it's worth doing. I am so happy to have it. And if it can get you in a shop 5 years earlier, I think you should do it. But just know going into it that you should have a plan or solution to the dirt floor in your shop and eventually try and get concrete put in. So that would be, the cons to having a dirt floor shop. But let's talk about why we did this. So this was a old 40 by 80 Quonset that we had on my yard that we used to store grain in. And we built some bins and we no longer needed it for grain storage. And this is on the far side of the farm, and me and my brother are doing our own thing. So we figured, hey, it's probably worth it to have a shop where I live because I'm the one working on the equipment. But when you start pricing it out to build a building, put up the structure, the roof, all of it, insulated, electrical, and concrete, you're easily looking at $300,000, which we're young, we are not made of money, and we're trying to get ahead. So how can we make it cash flow, but not take up too much of our budget to operate yearly on? And the best thing we came up with was, let's insulate this pre-existing building. Let's get a contractor in. He did some roof work with the metal tin roof. He insulated it. We got electrical done. We did everything we needed to turn this into a shop, except for spend the 50 grand that it was gonna cost to do the floor. So all in on this building now, we've spent between 40 and 50,000. I would say we're right at the 50,000 mark with the garage door in here. But that gave us a shop that I can work out of and make money year round. And we didn't have to spend twice as much to do the concrete at the same time. It allowed us to have some time working in here, figure out what we like, figure out if it's worth it, and now we're planning to put concrete in. So I do think it's worth insulating and making a building and shop, even if you have a dirt floor. There's just a few things you have to consider, but at the same time, they are very easy to deal with, and I don't think it should hold you back from doing the project.